Let me now bring in Des Browne, Lord Browne of Ladyton, who is the chair of the European Leadership Network. Des is a former UK Secretary of Defence and has served in a variety of ministerial roles as well as an MP. So when we talk about governance and the need for international cooperation on governance of existential risk, how do we translate that into practice, Des, when you think of the realities of knocking on doors as a MP, or indeed trying to get the multilateral system to function these days? Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Jane. Thanks for your words of introduction, and thanks to all of you for agreeing to help form this network, which I think is crucially important, and I am certain will expand in size and in its impact very quickly. So I was given, I think, about 2 hours notice that I would be in some sense responding to Toby's introduction. I mean, I have to say I'm honoured to be following him. I mean, he is one of the clearest thinkers in this space. But the question was summarised in the email I got, that, you know, why is it so difficult to get the public policy environment, you know, to respond in the way that seems obvious to many people to this. So helpfully I have, and I've had since it was published, Toby's book on my bookshelf. And this book, and I recommend it to all of you, but this book at approximately page 60, and I'm not sure whether the print and the reprint are the same or the other copies of it, but it's page 60 in the version I have. It deals with this issue of political science and why it is so difficult to get the politicians essentially to move in these issues. He summarises it very well, and certainly it's probably easier in China than it is for most democracies, candidly, because the democracies tend to be short-term thinkers. And elected politicians who in the United Kingdom, and I can talk about the United Kingdom more confidently than I can about any of the other countries that are represented here, but in the United Kingdom, we have a curse of short-term thinking. I mean, I was a Treasury Minister for a short period of time, and we aspired as a party to committing ourselves to funding after reviews for a period of 3 years, but we never succeeded. I mean, we would publish 3-year spending reviews, but by the second year, the pressure for a review of the review because of changing short-term priorities was such that we had to go back and look at these things again. And, you know, so we have this tendency, I think, to react to what will get us re-elected. And that is understandable, because whatever you want to do in the public policy space, you need the permission of the electorate to do it, and you need the permission of the electorate to spend their money. And my consistent experience, you know, of asking people to vote for me was that the best thing I could do when I knocked on their door before they came to the door was to turn my back to the house and look to see what they could see. Because almost inevitably, when I asked them what was concerning them, you could see it from their front door. You know, there was something that was immediate to them, and something that impacted the way in which their children played, or how they parked their car, you know, or whether there were holes in the road. And that was more of an interest to them. And I admit to getting to the situation in my constituency where, when we were building new schools as we were, or new hospitals, I encouraged the people not to take the scaffolding down before the election took place, because beyond the point at which the scaffolding was taken away, there was no promise involved in it. It was there, and it had been there forever, and you get no credit for it. So it's really difficult. But there are other issues in relation to the nature of these risks. And in fact, I mean, I have to hand it to Toby. He picks on, in a couple of well-written pages, he identifies them all. The scale of these risks is intimidating for most countries. You know, we can have no debate about climate change in the House of Lords, and there are many of them, as you can imagine, when somebody doesn't stand up at some point in the debate and say, but if China keeps still building coal power stations, this is all pointless. You know, just the scale of this, there's nothing that we can do that matters. There's nothing we can do to affect this. And candidly, that is not true. You know, we have in the nuclear field, for all things nuclear, a global regulation that is called the International Atomic Energy Agency. It doesn't work perfectly, but it works fairly well. And, you know, you need to comply with a set of regulations that are recognized. People don't always comply with them, I understand that, but there is a degree of regulation which has helped us to avoid catastrophe in the use of nuclear energy by accident in the peaceful use of it. And generally it has. It's not exclusively done that, but it has done, and it's contributed to our good luck in the absence of use of atomic weapons since 1945. But it's mostly been by good luck, because I think deterrence is a very unsafe policy to have with these weapons. The probability of things going wrong is pretty appalling. I mean, J.F. Kennedy, I think at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, said it was 1 in 3, and certainly you wouldn't bet on that level of risk. But there are other ways of doing this. I mean, if you take, for example, the development of biotechnology, we didn't do this completely, and we haven't done it to the point where we needn't worry about, the deliberate use of some sort of bio threat and perhaps a very catastrophic or maybe even existential way. But we did develop, as we developed the technology and as we put research money into that, we put research money in parallel into bioethics. And there was a very strong parallel track of research on bioethics, which in most countries has developed into a regulatory structure. So it is possible to do these sorts of things. And we could do this, I think, relatively easily in terms of structure, and not very expensively individually in relation to the AI threat. One of the really interesting responses to yesterday's publication of the Centre for AI Safety statement, signed by all of these major figures in the AI research and representatives of the key tech companies who were developing this, was that the increase in the number of other researchers and people who are saying, I'm actually not worried about that. I'm much more worried, about the existing problems that artificial intelligence and its deployment is generating in ethical ways. And there are some suggestions in the reporting of yesterday that this is a deliberate smokescreen to avoid the discussion of these existing issues, to deflect people's attention away from them. The fact of the matter is that the public realm and the politics and politicians are not unaware of those risks. They actually talk about them quite a lot. The ones they don't talk about are the existential element, or the potential existential element of this. They're not solving those risks. And the reason they're not solving those risks, and this is a lesson to us, is because they were aware of the potential of them, that there was an element of risk that came with AI, even at that level, even in the facial recognition level. People were talking about the possibility of the data being flawed, or of the technology not reacting properly and misidentifying people, or of it being used to confuse people about other people's identities and other things. They were aware of this, it was there, but it wasn't until it became a reality that they retrospectively tried to deal with it. So, as we have in Parliament at the moment in the United Kingdom, this enormous piece of legislation called the Online Safety Bill. And it is dealing with things that are now part of people's lives that we let happen because we thought we could live with the risk for the capability. And that seems to me to be at the heart of this relatively short-term thinking, is that we want the capability. So we want we want the convenience, or we want the speed, or we want the efficiency, and it is worth running the risk. At the moment in the House of Lords, which I'm a member of, and I am a member also of this committee, there is a committee looking at artificial intelligence and weapon systems. It's an extraordinarily interesting journey that we are on, and all of this is all public. I mean, you can get it on the web. There's a lot of talk about international humanitarian law and the laws of war, which are in some cases centuries old, and how these weapon systems, even if they are AI enabled, can comply with that. But actually, there is very little understanding by any of the witnesses who come to us to persuade this of how the technology actually works. So they seek to convince us that this technology can be made to respond to the laws and work within the framework of the laws, but they never tell us that they're talking about a technology which is non-deterministic. In other words, you can't rely upon it producing the same result every time you ask it to do anything. And if you cannot do that, then if we understand that, and we've moved on to that phase now, in the evidence session, in which we are getting more people who are technically competent to explain to us how the technology actually works and whether we could be confident that it will respond the way people say it does. So, I mean, there are enormous challenges here, but we have, first of all, the scale of it and the consequences of it, and the current state of the international scene is such that it's improbable that we will find easily an international regulation structure. So this will largely depend on us doing this country by country. And if countries that have leadership roles in the world are prepared to engage in these issues, then others will follow. It just seems to be that this ought to be very obvious, that most of these risks that we face now, which we list in most countries, I mean, we have a register of the risks that we are most concerned about. For all of my time in politics, pandemic has been at the head of them, and we were caught unaware by a pandemic, despite the fact that it was the #1 risk on the list and had been in every country that had a risk of these, a list of these risks that they were concerned about. I believe that the fundamental reason for that is because there is not enough knowledge in the political class of these issues and the nature of them. So what we need to do, in my view, is we need to spend more time with each other. The people who have the technical knowledge and the technical awareness, the people who develop these, the researchers, they need to work together, but they need to work together with political decision makers. And where they have done so, and they have done so in relation to nuclear weapons, it was the scientists themselves that led arms control and nuclear weapons. It was the scientists themselves that led what arms control we have in biosafety. It was the scientists themselves that led arms control in relation to chemical safety, and why we banned weapons in the two latter cases from these, and we could ban them in AI if we had the courage to do it, and if we weren't so bamboozled about the exquisite technology and the exquisite results that this can deliver. So we need to, that's why I'm so pleased to see the statement of yesterday, because it's so all comprehensive in terms of the people who know what they're talking about. And if these people can come together like that in those numbers, and they can encourage other people to join them, then we have some possibility of having a global discussion about this that may result, at least, in the sort of regulation that we will need for artificial intelligence. But secondly, young people need to speak up. Young people who are going to have to live in this world more likely than I am at the age of 71, you need to speak up, and you need to make demands of your political leadership that they leave to you a world that is capable of being lived in and improved, rather than leaving you with the constant threat of the manifestation of some of these risks, which will make the world unable to be lived in at all by human beings. And that danger is there, and it's there in many ways, in climate change and in cascading effects from the manifestation of some of these risks that you will be discussing. But you need to speak up, and you need to demand of these people that will happen, and that is possible. It is possible. You should be confident, in your own ability to be able to change the way in which we make political decisions, and you should be confident in our ability to be able to get these things under control well enough that we can live with the benefits of them as well as with the risks.
Thank you very much, Des. Fantastic. Great to hear from you. Let me bring in now Professor Zeynep Alemdar, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Business and Administrative Sciences and Head of the Gender Studies Research Centre in Okan University in Istanbul. Zeynep is a member of the ELN and has made a journey from originally coming in as a member of the Younger Generation Leaders Network to becoming a senior network member, and also now a member of our board. So we're very grateful for her active contribution to everything that we do. And Zeynep is the founder and director of Women in Foreign Policy Initiative, which aims to promote women's voices on a range of issues, but particularly on hard security. And I'm hoping, Zeynep, that you will speak a bit to the importance of having more diverse voices and younger generation voices engaged in these topics. But feel free to share any thoughts that you like with us. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here, especially being a ex-YGLNer. And it's wonderful to see you all, albeit online. I would actually just take upon where Des left in terms of how we should interact more, the technical knowledge people and the decision makers and the political and the politicians should be interacting more, which is what the ELN is doing with these types of programs. There's I hope some of you are aware that there's a wonderful article. It's an old one in 1987, written by Carol Cohn, and she talks about how she was visiting the she was amongst the nuclear strategists, and she realized that that techno-strategic language of the nuclear war strategists basically even captured herself. And she started talking about these, nuclear war and all these issues in such a way that, such a passionate way as men do. And she realized that techno-strategic language actually annulled the fact that we were actually talking about death. And the name of the article is aptly Sex and Death in the Rational World of Defense Intellectuals. So I think that is one of the things that we should be, very careful about when we are, doing these types of works on existential risks, the language that we talk. So I think one of the reasons why diversity matters is that. Once we have, various people coming from different backgrounds, to different ages, sexes and races, it's important that that we listen to each other, which I don't think I really have to say anything about the ELN, given, I'm of course particularly honored to be part of this group, which is 50-50 gender balance. And also, I do not know whether the new members have actually had a chance to read, but the ELN values, I just looked at it right before this, and the ELN values on the website actually is a very good way of, showcasing how this diversity, will work for our advantage in the future as well. But on the other hand, maybe I can also say that, while we are dealing with such strategic problems, nuclear war, AI, the biotechnology, the ecological collapse, if we still need a question of why we should be diversified, and how we should, get more people into the game, is I think one question that I would ask would be, in the first place, why do we really study existential risk? Existential risk is, I shouldn't be probably talking when Toby is here, but when I think about existential risk is, the first thing that comes to my mind, why do I care? I'll be dead, after that. So apparently, if you are all, working on this, apparently you care about other people and other generations, So I think that's a, pretty straightforward way of, we know why we care. But then on the other hand, especially for the work that I'm doing for women and foreign policy, for example, one of my jobs is actually to convince defense intellectuals, international relations professors, and policymakers, and mostly foreign affairs people in Turkey, is actually to talk about why this matters, and how would it benefit us. And there is a lot of research on the correlation between gender inequality and armed conflict. So it's very obvious. I mean, for the past, that research also started in the 1980s, late 1980s, and the international relations scholars started looking into it. I mean, feminist international relations scholars started looking into it. But there's this one number that I love, looking at, which is not very safe in terms of the causal relations, but the correlation is there, which is this: the lowest 20 nations in the OECD's gender gap index are the countries where there is gender inequality, and I mean rampant gender inequality. So these types of correlations are important, and I think is a good way to, if you have to convince someone else that why gender is important in international relations, you can just pitch this. Another one is, of course, the long-term conflict normalizes violence against women. There's now also a lot of new. I mean, for me, new, maybe for you, you're already in it. A lot of literature on ecofeminisms and things. So it's, the climate change affects women more. So, I mean, it's always, you can basically, look at any type of conflict and see how women are, affected more adversely just because of the, gender inequalities. Then once we look at the decision makers side, we also find a lot of research on how when there are, for example, higher number of female parliamentarians in a country's parliament, we see that there's less chance of a civil war. There's less detention, torture. There's less terrorist activity and all those. Then whenever we look at again the members of the parliament, for example, we see that when there's 35%, when the 35% of the parliament is female, we see that there is a conflict's probability to re-emerge goes near to 0%. So when there are women who are peace builders, again, a conflict's propensity to re-emerge goes close to 0%. So there is a lot of research like this, which basically proves that when we include women in the decision making, when we include women in negotiations, when we include women during all types of arms cessation of fires, we find that the propensity of the conflict to re-emerge basically decreases. But I think there is also another part of this, trying to prove that women matter in decision making is is a job that you don't really want to do at this point. It's we are living in this age, and you don't have to really convince people of the necessity of including 50% of the people in the decision making processes. Yet, I think the academy too have gone on to this, has found itself in this kind of this pit hole. And I'm not saying this as in a disrespectful way for the academy, but I think we underestimated the effect that that this made upon the upon the discussion with the policymakers as well. And even when I now look at the existential risk, centers descriptions of what existential risks is, they say, oh, it's global injustice, and they talk about structural discrimination and, corruption, profound inequality, post-colonialism and all that stuff, which is terribly important. And of course, yes, we should look at, yes, we should, solve all these global injustices, and, we should change the system. It's very obvious. But then on the other hand, I think it's not particularly about post-colonialism or anti-racism that we should be focusing upon when we are talking about things such as, existential risk. We should more talk about, how to make individual rights more important, the equality before law more important, rather than, these group rights. Because once we go into this, especially, I'm talking for myself, as a feminist academic, or, and I talked about this with my, philosopher friends as well. Once we look at this, once we try to convince people about this, how important global injustice is by looking into these issues, and then we kind of lose the interest of the politicians as well. And we cannot really get to the rational part of, why this really matters. So then I will go back to my circle. And again, I think using that particular research to, that I've cited some of it, to actually say that, hey, this is just ludicrous at the very beginning, 50%, and individual rights is important, is a better way to go. I know that I'm saying something very provocative, but I like it that way. So so I think those are the couple of things that I might bring to this discussion. And one of the things that I can also say is that, what the YGLN experience has given me, and the ELN experience has given me, is really not only the interaction, the amazing interaction between the colleagues, but also the chance to be able to meet with, amazing global scholars, decision makers, and new generation. So, I'm proud to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zeynep. That was extremely rich as ever, and I hope some of our future discussions can delve deeper into the intersections between feminist foreign policy and existential risk, and how can young people weigh up choices between social justice now and thinking about the long term. I think there's a lot that's very rich to dig into there. But let me now throw this open for comments and questions from everybody else who's here.